Did you hear about this news on Google last week? Demis Hassabis getting a restructured new role over at Google, no longer CEO of DeepMind, and Jeff Dean, who's worked there for 27 years, longer than anybody that's in a non-executive role at Google, announcing his departure. I can tell you that X and the finance bros over there and the AI bros were absolutely, just lit ablaze at ridiculing Google and jumping on the Google is dead bandwagon that happens, basically every other day over there. But I am here to tell you that you can rest assured that all of this is utter and complete nonsense. These people have no idea what they're talking about. They don't understand Google. They don't understand AI. And they do not in any way whatsoever, which is just mind-boggling to me, understand the consumer market. But have no fear. I'm going to explain it to you in case you don't understand. First of all, though, let's go through some of the drama. Well, what do we see over here from the Xites? Today is the day that Google died. Tai Kim is a known hater of Google, lover of Elon Musk. I find it funny because Google is a company that delivers. Elon has companies that never deliver. But Tai, man, he is hyping up Elon stuff all the time and always making sure to never pass at a chance to take a swipe at Google. Manas, Google announced Gemini 3.5 Pro back in May. It's August, still not out. Meanwhile, we have Grok 4.6, Meta, Muse Glimmer, Nvidia Nemotron 3.5 Lightning. What's even going on with Google? Mark Hahn, Google has already strategically abandoned Gemini 3.5 Pro. Nobody knows that, but apparently Mark does. John Nolan, based on my literal first experience today with Gemini, I'm glad I'm not a Gemini user. My company is though, so thought I'd try it. First day and last day. So reading these types of comments, you'd be surprised to hear from Sundar that 1 billion people are now using the Gemini app every month to spark new ideas and get things done. It's our fastest growing product ever and our 14th product to hit the 1 billion user mark. Kudos to Josh Woodward and the entire Gemini team, and thank you to everyone who's been on this journey with us. Now, to be crystal clear, Sundar and people from Google clarified what this meant. This is literally, what this means is 1 billion people using the Gemini app in the last month. This is not talking about Gemini and search. This is not talking about Gemini and YouTube. This is not talking about Gemini and email. This is 1 billion monthly active users in Gemini directly itself, the app. Okay? But don't tell that to the Xverse. They have no idea. Maybe that's because you're forced to use Gemini every time you make a Google search. He's talking about the app, Swirly. And who's this guy? What percentage of that is people who are not paying for AI having it forced into things like search and Gmail while literally telling you to remove it from such services? Add an opt-out button and we'll see how real your numbers are. Again, Dark Cost, I don't know how to say your name. This is the Gemini app. These are people voluntarily opening the Gemini app. Now, if you want to point out the fact that some people are like, oh, they're just talking about 1 billion installs, right? Because that's true. They own Android. They can release 1 billion products to anyone they want, really, at any time. But that's not what they were mentioning. They said 1 billion monthly active users. An active user is not somebody who opens it once. It's somebody who logs into the app and then comes back and logs in again. You have to at least have 2 hits to be considered a monthly active user. We actually know this from what Google disclosed in court at their antitrust hearing a couple of years ago. And so 1 billion users is what Gemini has. And why is this so mind-boggling to people? Well, I'm going to explain in a second. First, I want to mention that X did have people who were using their brains. Very crazy, I know. Martin Shkreli is one. By Google, as much respect as I have for Dean and Co., which is a lot, Google's bigger than any person. Further, losing these fine engineers may result in the board of directors asking what is going on here and changing management or making other change, which course correct for the better. What is Shkreli talking about? Well, simply put, the board of directors has been prioritizing TPUs. More on that later. And he thinks that this happening could get the board to light a fire under their butts to refocus their efforts on Gemini. But more important than that, he's pointing out that AI is beyond the time when one person can have an effect. And he's absolutely right. And I want to talk about that. Jan LeCun, all these other AI rock stars, they're no rock stars no more. It's not that you don't have guys that are still very good, still very talented. But the simple fact is that AI is bigger than any one purpose. If these guys were so pivotal and the only reason that Google is succeeding, then how are all these other companies out there succeeding without them? How is China going out every day making a new AI lab and all of a sudden catching up to us on the frontier? The simple fact is that when you get to a space that's now as big as this, it's saturated with talent. People know the methodologies. It's all about execution. And right here, Karthik Ramasay writes, I'm bullish on Google after today's departure. Google has a big issue of a lot of OGs sticking around for too long and making no room for new talent. Google has to rediscover a new Jeff Dean to lead for the next 2 decades. 25 plus years is too long for a non-founder to work in a company. Glad to see Jeff as the founder. Bullish on both Google and Discovery Loop. I absolutely agree with him. This is not criticism against Jeff, but 25 years is too long. In that type of time, you need fresh blood. You need new eyes. Jeff is moving on. That's fine. Google will do fine without him. There will be fresh new eyes to look at things. It's kind of like in tennis. I really like Novak Djokovic, but he's taken a spot away from guys that could, a younger guy coming up that could have his big moment. Novak already has 24 or 25 slams or whatever. He's probably never going to win a title again because, the best guys can beat him. But the simple fact is that by staying there, he's preventing someone else from having their breakout moment. Same thing in business. By Jeff being up at the head, 25 years of the same vision. I'm not saying he's not brilliant. Absolutely is. But, in all things, you need fresh blood. Sebastian Malaby writes, to those who are selling Google today, a cautionary tale. In 2016, Google was thought to have suffered a blow to its autonomous car ambitions. Anthony Lewandowski, a key contributor, quit and later joined as rivals at Uber. Fast forward to today, and Google's Waymo cards lead the category. Absolutely correct. And finally, Pedro Domingo, DeepMind's takeover of Google Research is now complete. And this actually was my thought of when this happened. I was like, hey, Demis got exactly what he wanted. You're hearing all these rumors to the opposite, but Google DeepMind has been looking to exert its influence within Alphabet itself for quite some time. And now it's actually complete. People are like, oh, they wanted to stay separate. But if they did, why did Demis keep sending his lieutenants over into Alphabet directly, trying to get into their research? Understand, that's been going on for some time. And I agree with Pedro. Part of me wonders, I don't really know, but part of me wonders if Demis was just tired of doing commercial products and wants to go into pure research. In other words, maybe Demis meant what he said. And since he is a scientist and he's more interested in curing disease than he is in making a frontier LLM for coding. Hard to say that wouldn't be true. But one thing I want to mention here, going back to this, Google targets 15 million TPUs by 2028, rivaling Nvidia's GPU volume. Why do I want to bring this up? Remember earlier when I was saying Shirkelly was talking about the board of directors? Well, this is something here that is extremely important. Google is making a lot of money off of their TPUs. If you watch my channel, then you know that I've told you that their TPUs are the best AI chips on the entire planet. At the time, I would say they weren't commercially available because last year when I would talk about them, they were not. However, now they are. And so you're talking about chips that are better than Nvidia's chips. And Google is realizing, their board of directors is realizing now, after just a few quarters, collecting those Nvidia-like profits gets highly, highly addictive. And that has a lot of people concerned. And that's where Shirkelly was talking about too. It's not that you don't want to be the underpinning, the infrastructure for AI in the next generation to come, but to also have that frontier model is really important. And so I agree with Shirkelly in the sense that you want to have a balance between both. And right here, this article talks about that a little bit. They say Gemini is cooked, but GCP is cooking. Now, I think they're going a little hard on Gemini here. Gemini is not done yet. Gemini actually still leads in quite a few categories when it comes to science and research, but in the stuff that the average consumer likes, such as coding, or not average consumer, the average X person likes, right? The average person on X, such as the coding task and things like that, it's not doing so well. But in this article, they point out that GCP is absolutely cooking. And they're looking at this as GCP within just a few short years could be the largest driver of Google, of revenue in Google, even surpassing that of search, which if you think about it, would be absolutely astonishing. But again, remember, we're talking that it seems possible they could be delivering Nvidia-esque numbers as soon as 2028. And so we come over here to our Google's earnings, and we can see what a monster quarter they had, $119 trillion. But I have more on this, but I'd rather go through this right here. Google has cash and cash equivalents of $242 billion. Okay, total cash, cash equivalents, marketable securities. This is all considered liquid. Okay, so when these guys on X are talking about Google and its demise, they're talking about a company that has a fortress for a balance sheet. Look at this in its assets, $921 billion. Liabilities, $281 billion. Yes, I know people are going to talk about they got these leases here, things there. You don't recognize leases until the leases begin. Okay, it's just simply put how it works. And yes, I know they had 1 quarter of negative free cash flow because they're investing into something that could literally be their biggest driver of revenue in just a few years. Don't you think if you had $921 billion in assets, almost $1 trillion, that it might be worth to reach into your pocket and pull out $5 billion to invest into the future for something that could drive even more revenue? I don't know how they're getting flack for this. I don't know why people are looking at this negatively, but trust me, over on X, they absolutely are. These guys are forgetting the fact that Google grew earnings 24%, okay, year over year last quarter. They're forgetting that search itself, which was considered dead by Gene Munster, grew 17% year over year last quarter. That Google Cloud grew 82%. Again, with the TPUs coming out, people are estimating this could pass search within 2 years. 82% it grew year over year. Absolutely astonishing. AI infrastructure momentum, 22 billion tokens per minute versus 16 billion plus last quarter. To be fair, this actually is a little bit of a slowing. And then Gemini is cooked, but GCP is cooking. They point that out. They point out that this is actually a reduction in the use of Gemini, but they point out that Gemini and any other AI provider doesn't have the margins that Google Cloud has. And this is true. But again, as Shirkelly was saying, board of directors has to balance this accurately. YouTube, we won't go into this. We'll just talk about AI. 950 million people reported at earnings 2 weeks ago, now crossing 1 billion, right? 1 billion people are using the Gemini app once again. And so now we're going to come full quarter here. When you hear people like this talking about Google, I want to make something crystal clear. They don't understand that the average consumer is not the average person on X. The average person on X is out there shouting and trying to get your attention. They're like a monkey throwing feces at the wall. They'll literally say or do anything to get the clicks. But the simple fact is that the average person probably doesn't really even know what AI is or what it's about. What they're going to do is use whatever is on their device. And Google owns 50% of those devices. And because of their deal with Apple, they essentially own the other half too. And trust me, Apple doesn't mind. Apple's fine with its hardware margins. Excuse me, guys. which is why they went into that deal with Google. If you don't believe me, look at what they did with search. They're pulling $20 billion from Google and search every single year. That's why they haven't made a competing search engine, even though they absolutely could have. Same thing is going to happen with Gemini. Apple has no reason to go out and make their own models. They say they are, but as we know, they're just distilling Alphabet's models. And what will happen here is where Apple right now is paying Google to distill their models. It will end up where Google will essentially be paying Apple to use Gemini as the default. And why not? Because by doing that, they're going to lock down the entire market in America. They have 13 products of 1 billion people. Understand, the majority of these people are not coders. They're not people who care about metrics. They're people who are going to ask, what recipe is this? What's the weather like today? Blah, blah, blah. Things that any AI is going to do. However, Google has the reach and the distribution to hit all those people. And that's what people like Tai Kim and SemiAnalysis are completely missing. Okay, now again, these are Tesla fanboys that are ripping on Google and have absolutely no idea what they're saying. In this video here, they're writing, Google has an L culture and has never actually made anything internally. They've only ever acquired all their innovation and their execution is very poor. Let's seriously do some accounting. That's what they say. Let's seriously do some accounting. And they start going through this stuff. And they're clearly forgetting the simple fact is that Google invented this entire space. Every single person on this paper is a Googler. This was an internal Google project. This was the paper, Attention's All You Need, that drove this entire industry. Every single AI that you use today, if it's an LLM, is using what was learned in this paper. It's based off of this paper. And to be fair, Google actually patented the transformer. Some people wonder if they could use that to launch lawsuits, but so far they haven't shown any incentive to do it. But the simple fact is that possibly they could. And just, to wrap it up here, Google has released more to open source than anyone, period. Any single entity. China now is releasing incredible amounts to open source. But understand, China is a country of 1 billion people. Google is a company of 190,000. No other single entity outside the Linux Foundation, perhaps, has created as much code for open source as Google. That's a fact. And if you look at all the products that they've released to open source, it has created many, many innovations over and over again. Docker containers, Go programming language, all of these things. There's just too much to list. So be careful of what you say here on X and what you hear from these doomers and gloomers that have no idea how AI works. Is it possible that Google falls behind in the frontier race? Absolutely. Will it matter? Absolutely not. What matters in the frontier AI race, unless you get to AGI, let me make that crystal clear, is who has the best distribution. And Google has that. Google has the best distribution. They can put Gemini into all of their products. People will use the app because they're familiar with Google. Okay? OpenAI and Anthropic have to win these people over. They have to build a moat that they simply put right now don't have. Even to be fair to Alania Reeves Muskrat, he has a better moat than that of Anthropic or OpenAI. Except I guess you could say Anthropic is building a pretty decent moat with their coding skills, but that is for a very niche part of the population. Now that's an extremely well-paying niche part, and people might point that out. But to win that isn't going to win you the consumer race, okay? Hopefully you understand nobody, period, is positioned better in the race for AI than Alphabet. Now, none of this is financial advice. Remember that the markets can remain solvent longer than you can remain, the markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. But I just want to tell you about this because AI is coming no matter what people like Ed Zitron say, and we all have to be ready for it. Thank you very much.